Like to introduce a fellow Minnesotan. I'm from Minnesota here, you know. And so we got a guy here that's coming from Minnesota too. And we kind of like that, you know, because we like people from the North Country. Colonel Steve Whitney is the director of the Global Positioning System Directorate, and you all know what that means. He's responsible for an enormous program. There are many pieces to it, some of which are perhaps somewhat routine, but most of them, I would say, are not. Is that fair to say, Steve? Yeah, $38 billion so far, annual budget over $1 billion. As I kind of hinted, he graduated from the University of Minnesota, whose hallmark, you'll get him to say, Sky-U-Ma. There you go, see? I've got it down. He has a degree in electrical engineering, so he is a real engineer. He also has served in a number of leadership positions, Air Force Joint Staff, and perhaps interestingly, the National Reconnaissance Office, which sometimes does things slightly differently than the Air Force, but nonetheless, they also build satellites. Steve.
Thank you. What an honor to be here today to sit and share and listen to some stories and listen to some great briefings and to hear your presentations today. I truly enjoyed it. I feel a little underwhelmed, you know, my Minnesotan. And my double E degree, so please do not ask me to derive Maxwell's equations. I too forgot them long ago. But just so that in the interest of making sure you actually remember something out of my presentation, because I understand that I sit in the dubious spot as the last speaker of the conference. So therefore that means you're either looking for some real nugget of wisdom, or you're thinking about your airplane ticket or the fact that lunch is probably outside. I want to provide you that nugget up front. Congratulations to the Chicago Cubs, and for the rest of us. It's 102 days until pitchers and catchers report. And for us Minnesotans, it's about 160 days before our Twins are mathematically eliminated from next year's World Series. So I'm here today to represent the men and women of the GPS Directorate. A team of about 650 members strong, incredible group of passionate, dedicated folks, much like yourselves, who are out there trying to do the best things that they can to produce position navigation and timing capabilities. We do this with our partners in industry, several thousands of those. I get the opportunity, as John hinted, that I get to execute most of the budget that is in the Department of Defense for position navigation and timing. But we are acquisition professionals who are out there developing, acquiring, deploying, and sustaining the GPS capabilities. All right, we set the gold standard. And so today I want to give you a quick update on where we are and how we're doing as I walk around that enterprise. As I do that, I want you to keep three themes in mind, three simple themes. Okay, first off, transparency. I'm going to share with you everything that you want to see and probably some that you don't about where we are in our programs. Okay, data-driven decisions. How we make our decisions is based on the physics of the situation, the data that is presented to us at hand, and we take a look at that data and then we decide the best course of action and execute. And finally, number three, performance standards. Okay, in particular, a published performance standard for GPS and how we do executing against that and how we set that as the international standard for where we're going. That applies to many things and many decisions that will be coming forward within the GPS realm over the next several years. And I want you to keep those in mind as we go forward, all right? I also want to serve as part of a recruiting binge. There's a number of you who are young scholars, and those of you who are young at heart, who if you would really like a really cool job, we've got some opportunities in Southern California, whether they be on the government side or on the industry side, we'd love to have you come out. Or if you'd like to just come out and have a discussion with us about where you're at and what you're doing, we'd really appreciate that, all right? So let's talk about the system and where it's going right now. All right, everyone's attention is immediately drawn to that bright yellow box in the middle, and that talks about the constellation of satellites. There's 73 GPS satellites that have been launched in the history of the program. 37 are currently on orbit that are producing a signal that could be read. 31 of those are set healthy at the moment, okay? That allows us to do some great things, and I'll talk in a minute what that performance means and so forth. But that's the level of performance that we have, and you can see there the age of the constellation. It is fairly old, and we are in the process of modernizing and improving the effort. And we have our next generation of satellites that we're developing. We'll talk about those in a minute. The stuff around the outside of that screen I want you to think about for a minute. When I first got into the Directorate, I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to be building satellites. I'm going to be working a little bit of ground segments. That's all I got to worry about is delivering my programs. But as many of you know, GPS is so broad and so important for everything we do. All right? What is it? The advisory board, we talk about it's like 14 of the 16 segments of the critical infrastructure of the United States runs based on something related to GPS. So therefore, the partnerships that we have on the civil side are working with Karen and the Department of Transportation and their efforts, the FAA, and how we ensure that capability, working with academia for new ideas. They're all very, very important to where we're going to ensure this global utility. All right? Working on the international side with the spectrum folks and making sure that that spectrum is protected to allow our mission to go through is very important to us. And we actually dedicate folks to going out and going to the international conferences. I tell them they like to travel a lot, but they do a lot of really good work. Addition, we do this from a military side as a partnership with our military partners. We have 57 partner nations who buy GPS equipment from the United States. If you think about it, that seems like a lot, but think about every airplane, every ship, every tank that gets sold as a DoD purchase by another country. The GPS unit in that item is a separate foreign military sales case. And so we process all of those here at the Directorate. And so I've got a large group of folks that do that. We also work a lot of international cooperation and signals, and we'll talk about signals in just a couple of moments. But we're working on the L1C signal and getting that ready to deploy. Talking about performance, where have we been? How are we doing? This is just a quick little snapshot. I'll step out of the way for those of you who are taking pictures of the slides. But this is the performance that we have over the last year. This is in centimeters. Allow me, for those of you who are metrically challenged, to do the conversion for you. 36.5 centimeters is about 14 inches. That's the performance you got on that day. That's amazing. And everyone goes, well, you haven't updated that recently. Well, we haven't broken it yet. We came really close the other day. We get daily updates on how we do in our performance. And right now, it's really kind of cool because you get them, and every day they're like, oh, it was 42, it was 46. We were down to 37, I think when we did the math, it was like 36.8, so we came really close. But then we get a day every now and then where it's 70 centimeters. And we're like, oh my God, what's wrong with the system? 70 centimeters. It just goes to show you how our perceptions of the data has changed as well. It's a standard that is expected of us as well. When I talk about those standards, we publish the GPS performance standard. It's on the gps.gov website. I offer you to go check it out. We've also published the 2013 report of how we did against that standard. The 2014 data has been compiled and is going through its final stages. And then we'll do the 2015 data. And then once the year is over, we'll crunch to do the 2016 data. Our goal is to get these down. We're working through a little bit of a backlog, but our goal is to get that out within the first 3 months after the new calendar year. But again, this is about what is the standard? We have a performance standard. What does the data say? Here it is. And we're being open and transparent about what we're doing. It's an expectation that we're trying to set for everyone. And we ask that the folks keep that in mind, but it's there for you to understand how your system is performing. So how is the system doing, or where are we going with the system and the modernization efforts? This slide is my opportunity to talk that it, as Brad mentioned, is a very complex and large problem to deal with, to synchronize 3 major developments all at once. I've got satellites that we've been launching and deploying. I've got a ground system. We'll talk about that. You may have heard about that small little ground system I have called OCX. We'll talk about how we're doing and where we're at. And then we're also developing user equipment. And John pointed out some of those uses as we talked about this morning. And I'll give you a quick update on where we are there and some of the successes that we've had and how we're a lot closer than 10 years away. So on the spacecraft, the funnest job anyone has in the space business is launch. It's also the scariest job, right? You absolutely have zero control over what's going on. You've done your best, you've done your homework, you've got it all prepared, but you're sitting in that rocket and you're waiting for it to go off. Or in our case, we're sitting there on the 5th of February and we're watching the wind monitor screen and we're taking a deep breath as we're watching that wind monitor, and they said, as long as it stays below, I forget what it was, like 13 knots from this angle, you're good to go. And we're all sitting there, and every time we get up to 12 and a half, we're like, Nobody breathe, nobody breathe. And then all of a sudden it go down and we all exhale. And then finally we got to like 7 seconds left in the terminal count where it didn't matter anymore. And we had this large wind gust that broke the threshold. We're like, we're going. So, but launch is really cool. And to my friends over at Galileo, who are getting ready on the 17th of November to pull off a remarkable feat, where they're going to launch 4 satellites at once off of a single rocket, I wish you all the best of luck. And I look forward to it, and I'm cheering for you, okay? This was an incredible campaign. Your directorate put this on to launch 8 satellites in 24 months. That's incredible focus. We haven't done that since the original days of the constellation. We were doing the original deployments, okay? And we turned that, and it was great. And it was a lot of fun. I actually got to, July, and I felt like I should be going back to the Cape again for another launch because it was just such a routine thing. But it is truly a great time, and we've done great work there, and we're very pleased with how those are performing. So we've moved our attention to the next generation of satellites, GPS-3 satellites. Okay, we're adding new civil signals to it. All right, satellites 1 through 8 are on contract and in production, and actually 9 and 10 were awarded on the 21st of September. We awarded the 2 of those for a tune of about $395 million for the 2 of them together. And so that's all on contract and it's going on. You can see there the baseline is basically the same from a requirements perspective. For those of you who don't speak NDS is the nuclear detection system. Many of you talked about charged particles and various EMP sensors. We will not have those on vehicles 9 and 10. Sandia is not building those payloads. So we'll fly a mass simulator instead. But it is basically the same vehicle with that. I'll talk in a minute about where we're going beyond that with Vehicle 11 and beyond on the next slide. But I want to give you a quick update of where we are on the processing side. So we've been through thermal vac on the first vehicle. We started that in October of last year, and on the 23rd of December, we finished it. Okay, thermal vac, for those of you who aren't satellite builders like Gaylord, is the most prescriptive testing that you can do for a satellite on the ground. You basically put it in the chamber, you lock it down, and you actually pretend that it's in space, and you run it through multiple cycles. Okay? As a bit of comparison, we did this for the first time, first flight vehicle, first time in a chamber, in 72 days. When we did 2F, and we did the first one in a new chamber, first vehicle, it was 21 months. Okay? The team that we have has put a lot of effort in making sure they got all the things right up front to make sure that it would work. And so that was proven out in the thermal vac cycle. Okay, we've also done some other EMI testing. And so that has all been successful. We are currently fighting through a number of small technical issues. Anyone familiar with capacitors would understand. We found an issue on our Vehicle 3 in April, and we had a capacitor part that actually wasn't qualified. And so we're in the middle of a life qualification test running 4,000 hours. We're trying to figure out how to figure out what is true verification for, is the part good enough for be qualified, and then is the build that we have match the design correctly. And so we're going through that testing, and it's been maddening to tell you the least. As you think about a small little 0.47 microfarad capacitor that only appears in like 621 spots on the Vehicle 1 payload, and the possible ramifications thereof. We sit and we talk about it, and they say, well, hey, I've got one group that says maybe I should pull all those capacitors off. Well, that means ripping the satellite apart and taking it completely out. And I've got an estimate that's well north of $300 million to do that, which doesn't seem reasonable when you think about it when I just bought 2 satellites for $395. So we're going through that math, and we're trying to do all those hard problems and making sure that the satellite is going to be there. Bottom line is we have a target mean life of 15 years for these satellites on orbit, and we're trying to make sure that we get there. And so we're arguing over, I think it's 0.12 year of life. Right now, we've done the calculations. If we had a 14.876 mean life expectancy, we'd be good at 90-something%. But because we're at 15, we only get to like 0.88% confidence. So we're working through all that. But the point is, we are trying to make sure that this system is there and capable for you when you need it. Okay, and we're trying to make sure we're doing the due diligence. The bottom line picture here, I just want to highlight. This is the high bay up at Lockheed Martin Waterton. What you're looking at there, the bottom right is Vehicle 2. The next one up is Vehicle 3, right here in various states of production. That's my non-flight test unit. I actually built a satellite that out of non-flight parts so we could practice our procedures and our chambers and everything else. And then on the far side of that is Vehicle 1. We're driving towards an available for launch date of December of this year. That capacitor qualification test is the pacing item right now. Right now that finishes on the 29th of December. And so we're going to be trying to wrap that up in a couple of days after that and trying to meet our target date. What available for launch means for you is that the satellite is done, and I'm now ready to go forward to the 14th Air Force Commander out at Vandenberg Air Force Base, who's the Joint Functional Component Commander for Space, and say, I have a satellite that's ready for launch. One of the problems I have with that is I don't have a ground system right now that can control that. And so it's a two-part problem that we're working through. First step one, I got to get a satellite. Second part that I got another group working on is a ground system. Before I get to the ground system, let me tell you real quickly about Vehicle 11 and beyond. All right, we're in the midst of looking at what comes beyond Vehicle 3. We have a two-phase acquisition strategy ongoing right now. I have 3 contractors, Lockheed, Boeing, and Northrop, on contract for small studies to what would it be possible for them to do a production-ready satellite, meaning I don't invest a lot of government dollars up front for the design and recurring engineering and changes and so forth. And so we're going through those discussions right now. We're also in discussions with Air Force Space Command and the friends at the five-sided puzzle palace known as the Pentagon about what the requirements are for that next generation of vehicles. And there's a lot of discussion as we talk about Space Enterprise Vision, which is an Air Force Space Command vision of how do we handle a conflicted and contested space environment, and how do we set that up. And maybe there's some requirements for GPS that we need to be aware of. Some of those requirements you might imagine are about how are we resilient providing PNT capabilities through a contested environment. And some of those requirements are how do we serve others in that contested environment to operate through. And so it's both how is GPS self-resilient to be able to ensure that we're there, and how do we provide a service capability. And we're having those discussions. And that analysis actually just kicked off on Monday. So we're working through that problem. All told, we're driving towards a draft RFP release for the Phase 2 effort for next summer. And that's what we're trying to target to get out. So we've got a lot of work to do to get that done. Okay? All right, let's talk ground. Second part of my problem in trying to get everything to work together is I got to have a spacecraft, I got to have a ground system. I've got the system called OCX. Per talked a little bit about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a complex and difficult problem, and many of the brightest minds are working on it. And we need your help. Okay? OCX is specifically designed to be a ground system that is hardened and capable of isolating folks as they come in. Think back for a minute when we were in the early days of GPS, the keys were, hey, let's protect everything at the outside, put a big fence around the outside, and let's then just make sure that nobody gets in, okay? And so all we're going to do is build large firewalls. We'll build large moats. Think of a castle, if you will. We're going to have these huge walls they have to scale, and once they're in, well, we'll have to deal with that, but we're going to just keep them out. We've discovered that that's a very difficult problem to just keep them out. So what OCX is designed to do is to be more secure with a layered defense type mindset. I'm still going to have those firewalls, those guards, everything at the front end, but I also want to make sure that each room in the castle has a different set of locks to it, or that they have different set of agreements so that only the certain people can get to the right rooms that they need to. You know, right now on our OCS system, the way it was designed, if you had access, you had complete access to the entire system. And so we've just instituted a very large update over the last couple of weeks to the OCS system to institute things like role-based access control to ensure that user A can only get to the things that user A needs to. And so that's been a huge effort to do that, but it's still not going to be enough. And so we're engaged in this effort to produce this system. Raytheon, my contractor, is underway, and we have a capability that is in development. We are in the midst of our final qualification testing for Block 0, which is how I do launch and checkout of a satellite. Block 1 is further out. That's how I do navigation mission. I don't have the dates there, but Block 1, we're talking a 2023 type delivery, or 2021 with a 2023 final operational system. So that kind of gives you some idea of where we're going. But I need Block 0 and the satellite to present to the General Buck, the 14th Air Force Commander, that I'm ready for launch. And so we're driving for that. Right now we have a Block 0 delivery date of May of 2018. Okay? And then that's, sorry, May of 2017, which then allows me to start a lengthy launch campaign for March of 2018 when we'd be ready for launch. And so that's the date we're looking at for that first GPS-3 satellite. You may have heard that we've had this little review ongoing on OCX called a Nunn-McCurdy review. What that means is in the programmatic world, there's a law on the books in Title 10 that says if a Department of Defense program exceeds more than 25% of its estimated unit cost, you have to go off and do a review, and you have to answer some very specific questions. Those questions are, is this system essential to national security? What are the alternatives to meet that system? What are the costs for that system and the alternatives? And specifically between teams 2 and 3, is there an alternative that meets acceptable capability at less cost, is the question they're trying to answer. Question 4 is it the highest priority system in the department to be funded? Basically, are there other things that are less important that you'll take money away from? And then Team 5 is is there adequate management structure? And so on the 14th of June, I realized that those costs, we'd exceeded those thresholds. And as the law written by Senator Nunn and Representative McCurdy says, it is the program manager's responsibility to step forward and say that we have that problem. So on the 14th of June, I signed that letter to the Secretary of the Air Force, and by the end of the month, the Air Force declared a Nunn-McCurdy breach. That led into our very intensive review with a very hard due date of 13 October, because if you do not complete that review within the prescribed timelines, the program is automatically terminated. And so we went through that review, and we had a lot of folks come out and talk to us, to simply put it that way. I had one team came out, and they came out with their opening questions, and it was 72 different requests for data, and they followed up with 110 action items out of the review that we had to turn within a week. And so the team very dedicated to getting that done. We've completed that review, and on the 12th of October, Mr. Kendall certified to Congress the program is, 1, essential to national security. 2, it is the alternative that meets capability at the lowest possible cost. It is the priority of the department to ensure that GPS is there, and he spoke in his letter about how GPS is important to the world. And then most importantly to me personally was the management structure is adequate to meet the job. Because to be honest, that was a little bit of a, okay, submit your resume and let's have a discussion about why you're qualified. So we got through that, but at the same time we're executing a program. So we've been focused on executing this program and delivering this capability, and that's why we're in test right now for that Block 0 capability. When you look at what Block 0 provides, again, launch and checkout, versus what Block 1 provides, the ability to do mission, you'll notice there's a delta between the two. And so how do you get a GPS-3 satellite on orbit, checked out, and then how do you use it so that you have those signals available for folks to use? And more importantly, how do you get it so that you can add to the capabilities that you have today? The solution we've come up to is called contingency operations. So we are aggressively modifying the existing system to fly a GPS-3 satellite. Specifically what this means is I am adding the capability to read the GPS-3 telemetry. I'm adding the ability to command a GPS-3 satellite. I am not adding the capability to put in the new signals right now. That is a second step that we're looking at doing that would come in a second iteration of this about 6 months after this was currently scheduled to deliver. But we are aggressively going after this. It's very important that you understand that we are dedicated to ensuring that GPS is there, okay? No matter who you have on contract, it is our mission to make sure that GPS is available and ready to be used. And so that's why we've gone down this route. That's why we're going to look at other potential off-ramps to the OCX mission. This is a no-fail type activity that we have got to get straight, and so we're marching down that path. You can see there what we're doing. It does rely on Block 0 to do that launch and checkout. We had the PDR, the preliminary design review in May. We're actually on for the critical design review next week in Colorado Springs, and we're marching forward. All right? We're marching forward because those signals need to be there. There's 19 satellites right now on orbit that produce the new modernized signals, the M code. GPS 3 Flight 1 would be the 20th. And so it's important as we get closer to 24, we talked previously, I think it was last night, about needing to have 24 satellites. You may have heard General Shelton say that, to ensure that full constellation. So we want to make sure that we have a capability produced there as soon as that constellation is on orbit. The other part of making sure that there's a warfighter effect is making sure I have user equipment. And so John talked this morning about different things at how he uses user equipment. And let me tell you about where we are with our modernized program and how we're going. And the example I have for you in the middle here is the B2 program. We are building the circuit cards that fit into receiver boxes that go on essentially all the platforms of the Department of Defense. In order to prove out our capabilities, we have 4 nominated lead platforms. You can see them there down the right side of that blue box: the Army Stryker, the Marine Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, the Arleigh Burke class destroyer, and the B-2. Our effort with the B-2 is what I've chosen to highlight today, but we are making progress on all of those. So right now, where are we on the B-2? I have a prototype card, basically a production-ready sample of the card, and it is in a prototype receiver. That prototype receiver is sitting in the B-2 System Integration Lab, where it is hooked up to the B-2's new stealth antenna and to the B-2's new operational flight program, the computer software that flies the B-2, and it is tracking live sky data, both Y-code and M-code. And so we're getting closer and closer, and we are waiting right now. We are not the pacing item in that OFP upgrade. There are a couple other things that are driving that, but we are sitting there waiting and ready for them to say, okay, go ahead and deliver. We've also completed all the safety of flight testing for that new box, which is important because then you can actually put it on an aviation platform and actually go out and fly it. So we're making a lot of progress here. There's a lot of work to go. Our strategy for this has 3 different contractors that are currently producing these cards. 2 of those 3 have experienced significant cost increases over the last year. Okay? One of those we're looking at the possibility of terminating because of where they are and how far out they're going to be. And so we're having those discussions with them. But the strategy we have progressed on and that we continue to progress on is trying to produce as many possible vendors for these receiver cards so that platforms, when they get down the line, have options to choose from. And so we're weighing that as we go forward. But that's the strategy that we're embarked in and we're actively engaged in. So I wouldn't want to leave without offering a few perspectives and thoughts. First off, yes, GPS is the global utility. It is the gold standard for position, navigation, and timing. It's funny, as I sit here and listen to the student briefs or listen to folks yesterday talk about things they're doing with wireless and so forth, and everyone describes those things as GPS indoors or GPS for this or GPS for that. So when you're in that kind of lexicon, you know that you're the standard. That also means we have a huge responsibility to protect and sustain that capability. And part of that is in doing some of the things we're doing with the Department of Transportation. Okay, we're currently conducting what we call adjacent band compatibility testing, and we're going through that effort. Again, 3 themes I want you to remember with that. Transparency in the process, number of open workshops on how the process is to be conducted and what tests are to be run. Data-driven decisions. We have the data, we're sharing that openly and through the Department of Transportation, and we're going to take a look at the physics of the situation before we make any recommendations. Okay? And adherence to an international standard. And in that case, we talk about the International Standard for Interference. So those sorts of things are what we feel are important in terms of ensuring the gold standard, the global utility of GPS. Space Enterprise Vision I talked briefly about. It's about ensuring that we have an ability to provide GPS services in a contested environment, both that GPS satellites remain there and that our services support others that are involved in that, and you can use your imagination as that goes along. But it also includes the examination of multi-GNSS receivers here on the ground. And that's something I would challenge all of you of. We talked at ION about multi-GNSS receivers and their ability and resiliency from multiple constellations. One of the questions that I was asked, and I've told Gaylord he's not allowed to ask any more questions today, was about how do you ensure integrity of different signals? And if I'm the GPS guy, but I'm pulling in different satellites, how do you ensure that? And how do you do that mathematics? And do you do that mathematics for the geekies of you, the world, in the I's and Q's channel inside the calculation, or you do it where I create a GPS solution and a GLONASS solution or a BETA solution and then compare those? Those are all tough questions that I'm looking for all of you in the room to help us answer. What is the best way to go forward there? But we know it's somewhere we need to go. And that's why I really appreciate the labs and forums like this for the ability to share ideas and have discussions. Lastly, I mentioned before, we've had some challenges in our programs. We're going to address those head on, and we're going to share, because it is all about making sure that this global utility is there. And so as I wrap up, I am proud and honored to stand in front of you as the director of the men and women of the GPS Directorate, and our ability and our capabilities that we provide. It is truly a great job. I know I'm number 16 in the order of directors. Brad was number 1, Gaylord was number 6. It is truly the coolest job in the United States Air Force, and I am honored every day by the passion and dedication of the men and women of the Directorate in this community, and it is my honor to serve with and for you. Thank you. Go ahead, I'll repeat it.
Okay. So I presume with OCX, there'll be an improvement in the accuracy of the broadcast navigation message. Could you say something about that and what the expectations are going to be?
Okay. So it's not really with OCX, but it's with the enterprise itself. So the question, for those of you who didn't hear it, was, with OCX, will there be an improvement in the accuracy of the navigation message? Correct? And so the answer is really, it's an enterprise-wide. It takes all the segments to do that. The requirement itself actually is significantly increased with the GPS-3 satellites and OCX combination. Previously, we had, I believe it was like 3-meter accuracy, but with GPS-3 and the system that comes on, the accuracy requirement that I'm specified to meet is less than 1 meter. So you'll see that capability come on. You've seen improvements through the ages as we bring on different technologies, right? When we bring in 2F, we have the second, the rubidium clocks and so forth, and we've seen those improvements as we take the 2As out in those older vehicles. That's really what's enabled us to have this huge jump forward over the last year or so.
Christoph Günther, German Aerospace Center. Thank you very much, Colonel Whitney. And actually, we are really admiring what you're doing with GPS and your team. My question is, you are encouraging multi-constellation use, right? Did I understand you right?
That's correct.
Do you think also of doing that for the military? And my next question would be, are you considering processing the signals from other satellites as well, as you do for the GPS satellites? So the question is then clearly how to distribute the corresponding data back to the user. Yeah.
Right, right. So the question from Christoph was multi-GNSS, and are we looking at using that for a military type of use? And the answer is yes. My mission as a military member is to provide the best capable PNT systems for our warfighters. And how do we do that? We're still struggling with that, and so that's why I'm, again, looking for help here from what is the best way. Do I do it inside the I's and Q's of the calculations? Do I do it afterwards? How do I do the signal integrity and so forth afterwards to ensure that it's best possible signal? So those are all tough questions we're dealing with, but we're very committed to trying to get that done. I think Tom has it.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.